This is certainly a very beautiful and blessed and edifying thought, that the eternal life is a renewing. However, I shall not pursue it farther, for in my opinion, it is so beautiful that it is almost dangerous, and may very easily become an illusion, because just at the moment when it appears in all its beauty to a man, instead of giving him headway in his striving, it deludes the imagination, as if the renewing came to pass by magic, as if the renewing did not, in another sense, require a long time. Truly, a man must have learned very much and learned very thoroughly in the school of suffering, before he really dares for his own edification to entertain so exalted a thought. If ordinarily it holds true that one must creep before one can walk, then here it is true that one must walk before one begins to fly, and this thought embodies the soaring flight of eternity. Therefore always I prefer to speak about the humbler things, about the slow and difficult period of the beginning of the training, for such a speech can deceive no one. And on the other hand, he who has come so far that in true edification and advancement he is refreshed by the thought of the renewal, needs no other human speech, least of all mine. On the contrary, I have need to learn of him. But although I do not myself wish to speak of this, I yet will in conclusion, in order to resolve the problem posed as the subject of this discourse. The joy in the thought that the school of suffering trains for eternity, call to mind what one of the oldest teachers of the Church, one of the Apostolic Fathers, has so beautifully expounded. He relates in the part of his book, Hermas the Shepherd, which is called The Visions, how God favored him with 3 visions. These had, in addition to their significant content, also the remarkable feature that the one who showed them to him and explained them was the first time a very old woman, the second time she was younger and more agreeable to look at, although she still had the hair and the wrinkled skin of an old woman. But the third time she was young, joyous, yet earnest as the youth of eternity is. He now goes on to explain this more particularly, but adds among other things also this: they who sincerely do penance shall become younger. Thus he again restrains the powerful thought, lest it become an ambitious delusion, so the learner not only does not become younger, but what is even worse than becoming older, he becomes deceived. And so this speech too again restrains, for it is only the school of suffering which trains for eternity. If any such thing is granted to a man, then it must happen to him in the school of suffering. For all that, the joyful indeed comes. It comes at last as it here comes last, that no school lasts as long as the school of suffering, and that therefore no one lacking this suffering trains for eternity, and that in the school of eternity it may come about that the learner is renewed. Neither science nor knowledge nor anything except suffering, if one learns obedience from it, trains for eternity so truly as he who was and is the truth, he who knew all things, yet learned one thing, but nothing else. He learned obedience from the things which he suffered. If it were possible for man to learn obedience toward God without suffering, then would Christ as human not have needed to learn it from suffering. It was human obedience he learned from his sufferings, for the eternal harmony of his will with that of the Father is not indeed obedience. Obedience is part of his debasement, as it is called. He humbled himself and became obedient. But this, his debasement, lies in the fact of his being human. Hence it is fitting for man in relation to God that obedience is learned only from sufferings. If this is necessary for the pure, how much more then for sinful man? Only suffering trains for eternity rests in faith. But faith is in obedience, and obedience is learned from suffering. There is no obedience without suffering, no faith without obedience, no eternity without faith. In suffering, obedience is obedience. In obedience, faith is faith. In faith, eternity is eternity.